Hello, my saplings. I'm Trini, and you may have noticed that this is not your regularly scheduled Raven. They are on break at the moment, but wanted to make sure you continue to get content. So instead, I get the chance to be your special guest for a few videos this month. Today we will be reading Countdown for What, as a bonus to last month's Soulmate September series, where everyone is born with a timer that counts down to when they meet their soulmate. Content warnings will be in the description. Summary. Virgil hates waiting. Can't stand it, really. He can't even deal with a timer counting down in a video game, much less one counting down to one of the biggest changes in his life. Meeting his soulmate. "Wake up, Virgie!" A voice called, ripping away the blanket he was snuggling into. "Bitch?" Virgil kept the thought to himself as he glared up at a freckled face with too wide of a grin for this early in the morning. Patton was his best friend in the world, but no one should be alive at this time in the morning, much less that cheery. He burrowed further into his pillow and pulled his knees up to his chest to conserve the warmth that had been stolen from him. "Oh, come on! Time to get up! You have a big day, Virgie! You're never gonna meet your soulmate just lying there!" Patton exclaimed, grabbing hold of Virgil's tucked wrists as he started to lean backwards, pulling him away from his comfort source. "That's kind of the point, Pat." Virgil grumbled and shook him off, but conceded to the fact that he would not be returning to his bed. If he tried, Patton would start pulling out the big stops, like the time he poured a glass of water on him after he tried to sleep his way through his own unsurprising surprise party. "Come on! Logan's already got coffee on in the other room," Patton exclaimed, linking their hands and leading Virgil out of the bedroom with a flourish. Virgil let out a lengthy groan to make it abundantly clear how he felt about the situation. That didn't stop even as he entered the kitchen. Logan just rolled his eyes at Virgil in Patton's entrance and wordlessly handed Virgil a cup of coffee, effectively getting him to finally shut up. Virgil sipped at his sweet, sweet lifeblood and tried not to make a face as Patton pecked Logan on the lips as he slipped past to make breakfast. Patton and Logan were his roommates, sure, but there was something too pragmatic about their relationship. It reminded him a little of his parents. Then again, he supposed that was just what happened when he found your soulmate at the age of 6. Patton and Logan had been inseparable long before Virgil had ever known them. They were so connected at the hip that the only reason Patton and Virgil ever became friends at all was because Logan was an overachiever who both double majored and double minored in university, which suddenly left Patton with an immense amount of time by himself that he never had before. Logan insisted he try to make friends to fill in some of the gaps so he wouldn't feel so alone. Cue a soft boy looking around the university courtyard with big, lost eyes as he turned from group to group, looking for a place for himself. Then there was Virgil, barely paying any attention as he scrolled Tumblr on his phone between classes. Still, something about the dejected look behind those big, round glasses had Virgil moving from his favorite spot in the courtyard's tree to jump down. He landed next to the boy, who in turn let out a shriek as Virgil dusted off his jeans and straightened his hoodie. "Hey," Virgil remembered muttering so many years ago. "Let's go get some coffee." Okay," was the only response he had gotten back at the time as the lost boy followed him without another word. It turned out that Patton didn't even drink coffee. Still, they had been best friends ever since. Why couldn't that have been his life-changing moment? He would have more than happily been platonic soulmates with his patty cake. He still put his foot down and swore that Logan and he had their timers somehow switched, because the sweetheart was definitely his soulmate and he refused to hear otherwise. Logan always let out an annoyed huff when he argued it, but the stretched smile on Patton's face always made it worth it to risk Logan's ire. "Virgil, this is supposed to be a good thing," Patton insisted, taking Virgil's hand in his own and squeezing it compassionately. "You're going to meet someone wonderful, someone who will change your life forever." "That's what I'm afraid of," Virgil insisted, and pulled his hand away, cradling it to his chest as if it burned. Patton and Logan shared a look as Virgil curled his limbs in on himself. His touch aversion only made an appearance when he was really becoming anxious. He heard some clanging in the kitchen for a moment before a large glass of ice water was set in front of him and his coffee was pushed away. Logan squatted in front of him with a hand on the kitchen table to reach similar eye levels. "Breathe, Virgil. It is all right. Being nervous is completely normal," Logan murmured in soothing tones as Patton watched helplessly from the side. Logan was always better at diffusing Virgil's panic attacks. "Do you need me to run through the exercises with you?" Virgil thought for a moment and shook his head no. Still, he accepted the glass of ice water Logan pushed in his direction and took a large sip. The cold always helped shock his brain out of the spiral. "How are you feeling?" "I'm fine," Virgil groaned, his head in his hands. He wasn't really. He was still panicking, but it was more controlled now. Still, the splitting headache rising to his temples wasn't helping anything. "May I retrieve anything for you?" Logan asked as Patton finally braved reaching over and rubbing Virgil's shoulder sympathetically. They both seemed pleased when Virgil didn't immediately shrug off the touch, even if Logan frowned when he shook his head with a definite no. Sometimes it felt like they were practicing on him for when they eventually adopted a kid to complete their white picket fence familial unit. The weirdos. Then again, it was nice when Patton baked him cookies. Even Logan checking in about his sleeping habits wasn't so bad, really. They'd really make great parents someday to some lucky as fuck kids. Patton and Logan shot him worried looks as he suddenly went stiff, and Patton pulled his hand away before Virgil bolted. Oh God. Was he in the way? Was that why they were so insistent on him finding his soulmate? So he'd leave? Did they want him to leave so they could get their all-American dream and adopt their 2.5 kids? Hey, Virgie! Patton started in a whisper, his hand hovering just inches away, ready to give comfort in a moment's notice. "What's wrong? What happened? Are you okay?" "Not so many questions at once, Patton," Logan chided. "Virgil, what's your favorite ice cream flavor?" Virgil swallowed and looked up, still able to see Logan's blue eyes despite his glasses reflecting Virgil's own pathetic expression. He choked out a breath and was able to utter out, "Cherry Garcia." "What movie did we watch last night?" "Stardust. You picked it." Logan nodded. "A compromise that you and Patton would both enjoy." "What day is it?" Virgil deadpanned. "I barely know what day it is when I'm in a normal state of mind." Logan smirked and patted his shoulder before pushing the ice water back his way. "I see you're feeling better." Virgil accepted the water and took another long drink. Bitch. He was just so done with the day already, and he hadn't even had breakfast. From there, it seemed that Logan and Patton had collectively decided the best thing was to give him some space, as the two took their places at the counter to work through cooking their meal together. Some days Virgil would help, but he was certain that if he tried today, Patton would shoo him away. He wasn't really in the state of mind for it anyway, and he was happy to stay where he was and stare at the slowly dwindling clock counting down on his wrist. Just a few hours now. Breakfast was a short affair. Eggs and sausage were placed in front of him as the loving couple took their usual seats next to each other at the other side of the table. He was sure it was all delicious, but he had to convince himself it didn't all taste like cardboard as his mind continued to reel. Everything was going to change today. Everything was going to change. He wasn't ready. "Maybe I should go to work," Virgil said as he picked up his plate from the table and took it to the sink. The least he could do as a good roommate was take care of the dishes. Remy's always complaining we don't have enough staff as it is. Did you not specifically put in for vacation today? Logan asked with a raised brow. Yeah, but... Oh, do you think Virgie already knows his soulmate? Could it be a coworker? Patton asked and practically had stars in his eyes at the question. While the familiarity might help Virgil with the shock, all of the documented cases I've seen show them not previously knowing each other before at least the day the timers are set for. However, there's still so much unknown about the phenomena that it is difficult to say anything for certain. Virgil chewed his bottom lip as he took Patton and Logan's dishes too, anything to keep his hands busy. Maybe I'll go into town, he muttered to himself. Oh, I can see it now. You bump into your soulmate, the two of you drop all your bags, and your clocks reach 0 just as you both touch hands while reaching for the same thing. You know, Pat, I think I've read that fanfiction. One of yours? Virgil asked with a snort. It will be now, Patton said, sticking out his tongue at Virgil from the other side of the kitchen island. Virgil mimicked him before throwing some soap suds at his cheeky friend. You're both pretty. Logan deadpanned with a huff at their antics, before standing and wrapping his arms around Patton's middle. Logan nuzzled his nose just under Patton's ear, and Virgil watched his best friends simply melt under the menstruations. I am certain that whatever Virgil decides to do, everything will work out, Logan said gently, and kissed Patton's forehead. After all, he knows he will always have us, correct? Virgil squirmed when he realized Logan had gazed directly his way when asking that last question. Fucking mind reader. Always, Patton declared cheerily in agreement, seemingly unaware of Logan and Virgil's silent conversation. The rest of the morning went by fast after that. Virgil tried his best not to draw his hoodie sleeve, because every glance at the countdown timer on his wrist only reignited his anxiousness. Patton eventually had to rush off for work, but pushed a packed lunch into Virgil's hands on the way out before kissing Logan goodbye. Yep, absolute parents. Virgil stuck it on the table by the door and paced their apartment a few more times. If he moved out, they'd have an extra bedroom available for a kid. His stomach turned as he tried to push that thought out of his mind. Logan said they wanted him here. Logan didn't lie. He sighed and eventually let himself collapse against the couch. He was already exhausted, and he hadn't even left the apartment yet. A few minutes later, Logan saw fit to join him, book in hand as the two sat quietly, with only the occasional sound of turning pages filling the silence. Virgil could not stop himself from staring down at his wrist. Even through his hoodie, he'd catch himself staring, rip his gaze away, and zone out with his eyes aimed in the general direction of the wall, only for the process to repeat again. You know, the timer will continue, regardless of how long you stare at it. Virgil gave Logan what he was sure was a pained look before finally giving in to pulling the sleeve back as they both inspected the decreasing numbers. Just over 4 hours now. I'm not ready, Lo, he said, holding up his wrist, showing the timer that would not stop. This will change everything, and I just can't. It does not have to, Logan said, setting his book aside. Think of it simply as an opportunity for change. You do not have to accept it. Maybe you meet someone. Maybe you do not. You may even find it is someone you cannot abide at this point in your life. You can always leave the situation. Call me if you need an escort if things go sour. And please keep me updated on where you go. This is always your home, first and foremost, regardless of what happens. If you cannot fit any person you meet into the life you want to live, then simply turn around and come back home. Nothing has to change. Virgil stared at square-framed glasses, stupefied. That wasn't something he was expecting to hear. However, Logan stated, as his expression took on an unusual wistfulness, I cannot imagine what life would be like without Patton in it. A life devoid of joy, I am certain, is most likely. Patton reminds me of how to live, rather than simply exist. You should know better than most, though, what I mean when I say so. He brings laughter and love in a way that makes me proud to be his partner each and every day. Virgil felt like he was sucker punched in the chest. Logan never spoke like that. He says I bring him joy too, though. I cannot imagine how. Still, Patton just wants you to have the same sort of happiness, Virgil. Virgil started. I am happy. Logan just smiled and squeezed his shoulder as he stood up. Just remember, this is an opportunity, not a contract. You always reserve the right to say no, and I can promise you that you will always have a place here. I will push no further, however. Whatever you decide to do, Patton and I will support you. Where am I even supposed to go? Virgil huffed out to Logan's retreating figure. How will I know I'm even going to the right place? There is no wrong answer. Supposedly, wherever you decide will be the right place, Logan answered, pausing at the doorway. Then what difference does it make if I stay here? Does it feel like this is where you are supposed to be? Virgil stared at him. No, it didn't. He gave a final groan and forced himself off the couch before stomping toward the front door and taking his bagged lunch with him. Fucking bitch. He wanted to kick something. Into waiting arms. What the hell? He ended up at the park, and his already fragile mood was immediately soured as he passed by a group of musicians in large, overly ornate hats, as one with a particularly stupid-looking mustache blew a sour note from a horn directly into his ear. He flipped him off and continued on the path, putting as much distance between him and the noisemakers as possible. Virgil let himself fall into old habits as he hopped and grabbed hold of a tree branch before he even realized what he was doing, climbing until he was situated comfortably with his legs stretched out on a sturdy branch and his back leaning against the trunk. Soulmates could suck it. He was going to people watch today. Plus, if he was truly doomed to have to deal with an extra person in his life, he might as well take survey of them before having to actually meet them. From here, he could see a few couples. Definitely not. A few joggers and dog walkers who were hurrying down the path. Not the kind of people who would be around in the 2 hours he still had remaining. There was an older woman feeding the pigeons because some cliches existed for a reason, it seemed. God, he fucking hoped not. He'd almost take the mariachi bastard instead. Maybe. Virgil let himself just exist for a little while, almost in a daze, but not quite snoozing as time passed around him. How was this soulmate thing supposed to work anyway? It's not like he had some kind of confirmation telling him that he had the right person. Maybe the whole thing was some conspiracy, pairing people together artificially as to force them into some kind of submission. Like, how was he supposed to confirm that he was even with the right person when the clock stopped? Or what if they passed near each other and never truly met? Supposedly, these timers were supposed to magically stop at the exact moment two people who were just supposed to accept living the rest of their lives together would meet? Sounds fake. Virgil's attention was taken as he heard a rustling sound somewhere beneath him and found someone arranging a picnic basket. Oh God, what kind of dweeb goes to the park looking like they stepped straight out of a fairy tale book? He did a double take though. Something about him looked oddly familiar. He wasn't sure how though. He could see some basically Prince Charming kneeling on a classic plaid red blanket and arranging a surprisingly impressive setup. There were covered hot plates with something that smelled savory and absolutely delicious. Some kind of cake was in a clear plastic container. There was a pile of seemingly random snacks. He recognized the packages of a few crackers, chocolates, granola bars, and even a couple of boxes of raisins of all things. 2 matching sets of cutlery with cloth napkins underneath the silverware. A 3-pronged candlestick was placed between the plates, with rose petals scattered around at random and, oh shit, was that wine? Was that even allowed at the public park? Virgil wasn't sure he wanted to know, but he sure wasn't going to rat the guy out. The dude obviously put in a lot of effort for his date. That was the kind of guy who deserved a soulmate, not Virgil. Virgil was still in his ratty hoodie and even rattier Converse, as he was waiting to meet them for the first time. A plan? Ha! In this economy? He was lucky he even remembered his wallet. He couldn't imagine being the kind of person who arranged intricate dates like the picnic prince down below. In fact, Virgil was a little uncomfortable being so near. He couldn't imagine that the happy couple would stay very happy if they found their private date was basically permanently photobombed by a guy chilling in the tree above them. Virgil shimmied his way across the branches so he could try to jump down and land on the other side of the tree, so he didn't have to deal with the strange conversation of falling in the middle of someone's picnic setup. What he didn't count on, however, was a branch catching on the pocket of his hoodie and effectively stopping him from making the trek to the next branch. In fact, being jerked back from crossing threw off his momentum enough that he couldn't seem to right himself. He tried to regain his balance on another branch, but it cracked underneath his feet, and suddenly he was falling. Virgil found himself staring straight up into the face of Picnic Guy. God, the would-be prince was even prettier up close. He had big amber eyes, a heart-shaped face, high cheekbones, and a pointy chin. He truly looked as if he belonged in the clothes he wore. "Are you all right?" the man voiced, but it was almost more rumble than true sound, and Virgil wasn't sure he could breathe. He squeaked out lamely, barely able to get even that much out, as he found himself freezing in place. Not that it was a bad place to be. Virgil shook the thought out of his head. The guy was clearly preparing for a date. He probably already had a soulmate, and Virgil had someone he was waiting to meet soon. Soon. Too soon. Oh God. He couldn't what? He couldn't do this. He couldn't breathe. Fuck. All thoughts seemed to be immediately wiped from his brain, as the only thing he could focus on was the sound of his rapidly beating heart pounding in his ears. He can't. Shh. It's okay. Everything is okay. You're safe. Whatever this is, whatever is scaring you so, I will protect you. You don't have to be scared of anything. I promise. It's okay. Yeah? How about we just breathe together for a little while, okay? Can you do that? Virgil swallowed and managed to nod after wiping some tears away with the sleeve of his hoodie. He wasn't really okay yet. But he managed to wrangle back up some thoughts from their banishment. Mainly that he was making a fool of himself, but anything was better than the sheer, terrifying nothingness of shutdown. Do you have a name? The now clearly deserving of the prince attire he wore, Guy asked, while setting him down gently at the base of the tree. Virgil. I'm Roman, the prince said kindly, and gave a reassuring squeeze to his bicep. It reminded him a little of Patton, actually. Would you like some sparkling cider, Virgil? Roman held up the bottle that Virgil had previously thought to be wine, but he could see from his position that it was alcohol-free. At least no random park rangers would try to arrest the guy. He deserved better than that, Virgil decided. Or, I have some bottles of water. Shit, I'm sorry, Virgil exclaimed, scrambling to his feet. What is it? What's wrong? Roman exclaimed, immediately taking a somewhat defensive position in front of him, like he was protecting him. I ruined your date. I should go. I'm sorry, God, I'm terrible at this. I'm sorry for everything. Wait, please, Roman exclaimed, grabbing the cuff of his hoodie. The damn thing was going to be the death of him. Virgil swore he was going to finally buy a new one when he made it home. You don't have to go. But your date, Virgil said, gesturing lamely to the beautiful setup Roman had spent so long on. Roman let go and pulled his arms in uncomfortably. I don't even know if they're coming or not, to tell you the truth. Wait, you did all this and you don't even know if they're coming? That's so stupid, I know, Roman said, looking down at his feet. I was gonna say brave, Virgil said, and gave a reassuring smile when Roman's gaze jumped back up to his. At least he wasn't the only one uncomfortable today. Thank you, Roman said, his voice contorting slightly. He sounded choked up. Virgil almost reached out to give him some kind of comfort, but stopped himself. That would be weird, right? He didn't, know the guy. Right. Would you please join me for a bit while I wait? Roman asked, his fingers fumbling with the hem of his tunic. On one condition, Virgil said. Anything, Roman immediately breathed, and Virgil could practically see the hope in his eyes, but couldn't fathom for the life of him why it was there. You gotta tell me the story behind the prince gear. Roman's cheeks immediately flushed a bright red. Oh, well... Virgil let himself flop to one side of the picnic basket, and Roman gracefully slid down to mirror his position, surprisingly still stammering. You see, I'm an actor, and I just came from, playing Prince Charming, Virgil asked with a smirk. Roman nodded shyly. In Cinderella, I'm usually much better at this. At least on stage I am. At what? At, talking? Roman said it as if it was a question. And, it was Roman's turn to gesture lamely, both to the setup and to himself. Virgil could basically grasp the gist of what he was trying to say at least. I think you're doing great, Virgil said with a grin. This guy was absolutely precious. He was almost jealous of the prince's oncoming date. If they didn't show up, he'd sweep him away himself. Fuck the soulmate. I really appreciate that, Virgil, Roman said with a sincerity in his eyes that left Virgil half in love already. Bad, Virgil. Bad. He was on a date. You have a soulmate. Focus. Anytime, Virgil muttered, and took a swig of the cider. almost wishing it were the wine he probably shouldn't have in a public park. Roman smiled, and Virgil was trying to convince himself he wasn't completely destroyed by that crooked grin. He looked relieved by Virgil's answer, certainly more comfortable. From there, the conversation seemed to flow rather easily. Roman spoke of the dinner theater he worked at, making decent pay, but he didn't plan to be there forever. He spoke of dreams on the stage, on the big screen, and Virgil could only nod along and admit it made sense that someone as pretty as him would be in movies. Roman shut down for a minute at that particular comment, but only grew more enthusiastic. Virgil learned he had a brother who had several books out, and that Roman wanted to catch up in prestigiousness. They were apparently twins, after all, and Roman refused to fall behind. Virgil spoke of himself, too. He told him about Patton and Logan, the perfect soulmates who had found each other so young, a couple truly destined to spend a lifetime together. He spoke of his friendship and how he came to be acquainted with the literal embodiments of suburbia. He talked about his job at the radio and even running his own show on the off times on nights and weekends. He told him that he would usually be there for a show at the moment, but his coworker was covering for him today. Roman spit out his drink, but looked immediately embarrassed for doing so. Sorry, it's just you're that, Virgil? You've tuned in, I take it. Only every night. What other station plays Disney music at 2 a.m? Roman exclaimed, and grasped Virgil's hands in his excitement, but then seemed to remember himself and curbed it back, releasing his catch. No, Virgil thought grumpily. I liked the excited boy. Bring him back. I like to listen to your show when I'm working on some of my own projects at home, Roman admitted, twiddling with the hem again. Well, I'm glad. If I can bring someone inspiration, then maybe I'll just never move the show, Virgil said, only half joking. Being on in the morning was considered prime time, and they always got the best commercial deals. But if he had fans like this, well, he didn't want to disappoint. You know, Virgil, I almost didn't come out here today. My brother kind of pushed me into it. He and his partner are a formidable pair. I can absolutely relate with that. Still, it's a pity that your date's been a no-show. All of that hard work you and even your bro put into it, they don't deserve you. I don't know about that, Roman said, staring with that same hopeful expression, and Virgil was ready to throw hands with whoever hurt this man by leaving him here alone. You think they'll still show? I was hoping that they were already here, Roman admitted, and pulled down his sleeve to a timer that was rapidly approaching 0. I was hoping it was you. The words echoed through Virgil's brain rapidly as he tried to process the meaning, the ulterior motive. He couldn't find any. He pushed back his own sleeve. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Oh. A small beep sounded in his own head. It almost acted like an auditory arrow pointing, no pushing, him in Roman's direction. Suddenly they were close. Suddenly they were inches apart. Suddenly hands were on his hips and all he could see were beautiful, amber eyes. Suddenly lips were on his. Just as he let out the first hints of a moan from the feeling of Roman's lips, oh Lord, his soft lips, they were interrupted and rapidly pulled away from each other at the sound of a microphone adjusting. This one goes out to the happy couple on the picnic blanket, newly found soulmates. How the fuck All the residents of the park cheered and clapped while looking in their direction. Confetti came from somewhere. Loud music started playing only a few feet from them, and Virgil was absolutely shooketh, seeing the band he passed when he first came into the park. I didn't hire them, I swear, Roman exclaimed, throwing his hands up in bewilderment and confusion. Virgil didn't doubt it. That guy in the mariachi band over there, that kinda looks like you, wouldn't happen to be your brother, would it? Ugh, God damn it, Remus, Roman said the name with more venom than the swear, and he pinched the bridge of his nose. Thank you for listening. Once again, this was Countdown for What? By me. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope you have a wonderful day.